introduce a couple of people. Kate is with us as well as Mike, both of them working for Future Generations University. Mike is the one, I have to say, I think the first time I saw him in person was at the Lake Erie Maple Expo, and he was talking about this topic. And I was sitting there just fascinated until one of my forestry colleagues that was also in the room said, man, my foresters just yell at me when we talk about this. Walnut trees are supposed to be those high dollar value trees, but we all know as woodland owners, there are some walnuts out there that are never going to make a $30,000 tree. And so there are alternatives, and it's up to you if that's something that you want to try. So with that, why tap walnut trees? Mike's going to talk about sap flow and sap production. And let me stop sharing, Mike, and you can share and we'll get started.
All right, that sounds like a plan.
There you go.
All right, let's see. Now I want to minimize this. There, I think we're at where we're supposed to be at this point, right, Kathy?
I don't see anything. You haven't shared your screen.
Oh, I have. That's the problem. Then we're not where we're supposed to be.
Kate, how close are you to him that you can?
I'm looking at the first out of the PowerPoint, so that's not going to work. All right. No, just not. It's not going.
Are you in presentation mode of your PowerPoint? You might need to cancel
Yes,
out of
I
that.
am. Yes, I am.
Yeah, cancel out of that.
Unfortunately, I don't know how to cancel out of anything right now.
Can you just press the escape button?
We'll try a delete. That one doesn't work.
Hey,
Escape?
Mike,
Yeah.
hit the escape button on the top left corner of your keyboard.
All right. All right. Now I'm out of that mode. Now I'm going to get rid of that. Just save this and we'll take it from scratch. Now let me get back to Zoom.
There you go. Don't forget to check those boxes so your video plays.
Yeah. Okay, so you're up there. All right, I am back, so I see the four of you.
Okay.
So
I
go to
can
the green.
share screen. All right. And we'll see if this works.
There you go.
All right,
Yep.
now I'm going to try to start this PowerPoint presentation.
You
You're
shared your desktop. You need to share your.
Yeah, you need to
PowerPoint.
share your PowerPoint
Okay,
screen.
we're going to get there.
Oh, he's opening it up again. Okay.
Are we now where we're supposed to be?
Well, we can see it.
It
Um,
might work when he puts it on slideshow.
yeah, so put it on slideshow.
How that?
Yep,
Do you see the first
That works.
slide? Okay.
we
So
do.
we're all where we're supposed to be. You should all be facing a blank slide that says why tap walnut trees, walnut sap flow and syrup production. Is that where we're at?
Yep.
Okay, then we're ready to go. All right. We did practice this, and we didn't practice it very well, did we? Because when it came showtime, everything didn't quite fit together quite that well. Anyhow, Kathy, thanks for inviting me to Ohio. I always enjoy my trips to Ohio, even if they're virtual. All right. And we're going to be talking about basically a question, why tap walnut trees? And we're also going to be talking about a statement, which is walnut sap flow and syrup production. Not really a statement, but that's we're going to start there, talk a little bit about walnut sap flow syrup production. And then we're going to work our way before we're done into why you may want to consider tapping some walnut trees out there. All right. So let's see. We'll now go to that. Do you see a nice picture of me? Are we there?
That's not you.
That is. In fact,
I
people
really
say
can't tell.
I've had people tell me that's the best picture they've ever seen of me. I thought I'd start by introducing myself. All right. I'm Mike Rechlin, and I'm in West Virginia. And by this point in this, early on this discussion, you've probably figured out that I'm not from West Virginia. All right. I'm what's called a come here. I came to West Virginia for a job with Future Generations. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I'm originally from upstate New York. Okay. Much more associated with maple country than certainly West Virginia. And my background is I'm a forester by training, okay? And by avocation, kind of a forest tree physiology guy. I really like to think about what trees are thinking about, okay? And what they're doing and how and why they do it. When I retired from the job that brought me down here to West Virginia, I got involved in the maple industry. We were just getting going down here. We had just started an association. People, we had 12 members at that point in the association, and tapping was relatively new. It's an old something that has happened for a long time here, but it was into remission and has just coming back. And I had some knowledge coming from upstate New York, working with Paul Smith's college up there, and I could apply that down here and help some of my friends get this game going in West Virginia. I helped establish the largest sugar bush in the state, the Dry Fork Maple Works. We had 20,000 trees on tap at that time. I went from there. The Department of Ag convinced me to come and work for them for a few years, so I did that. And when that gig was over, I moved over back to the organization that brought me here, Future Generations University, and brought my maple toolbox there. And we've been developing a program to assist Appalachian farmers get into this game from that point on out. So that's a little bit about me. I'm a teacher by profession. I've always been in the classroom in one way or the other. And I like to tell people, and this is where the slide comes in, folks. I like to tell people that what I really like to do is help students get their heads into trees, okay? Figure out how trees work, figure out why they do what they do. And we're gonna help you all this morning get your heads into some trees, and particularly into walnut trees as we go through the hows and whys of sap flow in walnut. Now, I'm sitting here in a room just talking to a computer, which isn't nearly as much fun if I was actually, sitting in front of you or standing in front of you and talking to you all. And so I try to mix this up a little bit and make it as interactive as we can. And working with Marnie, we've come up with some questions that I'm going to be asking you all, and you can answer those. It's a poll, so Marnie will run that however that works out. I'm also going to be asking some rhetorical questions, saying, okay, asking questions. I obviously don't expect people to raise their hands and answer, but you could, write down an answer or use the chat box or something like that, just to kind of help engage you in this next hour and a half session here. I like that engagement, and we Zoom all over the world these days, but I still miss that getting up and watching people's eyes sparkle from being in front of you all. So, all right, so we'll do that and try to keep as interactive as we possibly can. And certainly there's a box there that Marnie and Kathy will be monitoring for questions that may come up, and we'll address those at the end. All right, so who is that guy? That's me. I got a first question for you. I'm going to take just a few minutes here and say, who are you all? Okay. And Marnie's going to put up a poll here, I think.
Yep, working on it.
All right, so I'd like to know a little bit about your background. Okay. How many of you out there are forestry, natural resource professional background? Okay, kind of like where I came from. How many are students? Okay. How many are farmer? And you could be in more than one, farmer, landowner, okay, out there. How many are maple syrup makers? How many are, playing the maple game? Well, there's a couple at least. That's good, because we'll be talking about things that you'll really understand. And how many are just joined in because you're interested in one way or another? Well, right away, I'm quite pleased to see that we don't have any students in this, okay? And you might ask why, because I've been to presentations like this that were well populated with lots of people logged in, and then found out that it was all required by some professor at Ohio State or somewhere. But obviously that's not the case. All right. So you're all here because you want to be here in one way or another. And as we look at that, a lot of landowners, that's good. Okay. You all are trying to figure out and work on your farm, your income streams from that farm. A lot of foresters, natural resource professional, and then a smattering of folks who are maple folks, and people are just plain interested in what this guy might possibly say. So that's fun. All right, thanks for that. I will proceed now, and Marnie, you can drop that out of the picture.
I did. Are you still seeing it?
I'm still seeing it.
I think maybe you guys just need to X out of it on your own.
I can X out of it. I can X out of it. Okay.
Thanks.
So here's another question. We're not going to do a lot of these. I think there are 4 or 5 in total. Okay. And I'm going to start. We're going to take the first part of this presentation, and we're going to talk about why walnut is not maple. Okay. It's a different species. It's a different tree. It's got to be handled a different way. I'm going to ask you now on that poll, which is the walnut? Okay. Is it the tree on the left or the tree on the right? All right, look at those numbers switch around there. That's kind of fun. I've never done this before, Marnie, so this is great. Thanks for putting this together.
Yeah. Oh, of course.
Okay. All right. The right answer, you all, is walnut is the tree on the left. All right. Let's I'm gonna take this away. All right. Walnut's the tree on the left, maple's the tree on the right. And I'm sure all the forestry, natural resource professionals got that correct. Okay. As I look at them, the reason you can tell just by the pictures is walnut on the left is a little bit more lighter density of foliage. Maple, which tends to grow more in the understory of a forest, need to catch all the sunlight it can. Darker leaves, more dense leaves. Walnut tends to grow more in open fields, at least where I am. Okay, and maple tends to be more in enclosed forest stands. Although that's not always the case, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. All right. Now, there are a number of ways, in addition to the shape, the color, and the picture, in which these two species are different. And those ways impact how we approach tapping a walnut tree. That's different for you maple folks. It's a little different from maybe how you would approach tapping a maple tree. Okay. And we're going to go through those and think and kind of talk about them here a little bit. All right. First of all, the sapwood. On the left here is a picture of a cross section of a walnut tree. And anybody who's been doing any woodworking would know that, the value of walnut, one of the values certainly is the dark coloration of the wood. And that dark coloration is in the heartwood. And you can see that very clearly on that left-hand slide. Maple, on the other hand, tends to have much less heartwood. Take a look at the upper maple log there. That's a maple log that is, and maple will do this, particularly sugar maple. It can be all sapwood. Look at how nice and clear that is. That upper maple log, you can just maybe just a little spot of heartwood in the middle. And that's because maple actually doesn't have a set heartwood area, dark area in the middle of the log. It's called false heartwood. It develops heartwood due to injuries, okay? And so it does often have that dark area, but not always. You can have sapwood on a maple log like that one up there from one side of the log or one side of the tree to the other side of the tree. Lots of sapwood. And then if you look on down to the slide under that, anybody who's been a maple producer and probably seen something like this, that's a cross section where that crosses through an area that has been extensively tapped. All right. And you can see each of those tap holes, and you can see where the maple tree has walled off or compartmentalized the disease, the damage, okay, the rot in there. And that's a dark area on there. And now some of those areas have not worked their way in, but impacted the heartwood, false heartwood that's developed inside the maple. But even there, you can see that although that's been tapped a lot, there still is a lot of good sapwood in that maple tree. Now, if I had a quiz up here, my next question was, where do you think you get sapwood from? Or where do you think you get sap from the tree from? The sapwood or the heartwood? And it's obviously we're getting the sap from the sapwood. So we can take a look at that and say, okay, walnut's not maple. Maple's got a lot of sapwood, sugar maple particularly. Walnut has relatively little sapwood. So right away, you can start to draw some conclusions in your head about which might provide the most sap if you tap it in the spring. And the obvious answer there would be maple. Now, on the bottom here, it says approximately 11 rings. And that's because as the walnut tree grows a new annual ring, an old annual ring gets turned into heartwood. So you have approximately the same number of annual rings at all times. You make a new one, you retire an old one, make a new one, retire an old one. I say approximately because it varies by tree. It can vary by genetics. It can also vary by site. But here in West Virginia, and this came from a gentleman who has a plantation up near Morgantown, says his trees are 11 rings of sapwood, and the rest then becomes heartwood. So hold on to those thoughts. Much less sapwood, okay, and a set amount of sapwood than in maple. So there's one difference, in addition to size and shape, between our two trees that impact how you might tap it. Another is the hardness of wood, the wood, okay? If you look at this slide, and hopefully you're looking at it, hard maple is the third line down, bar down there. It's quite hard. Brazilian cherry, American hickory, hard maple, right up there in the what wood technologists refer to as the JICA hardness scale. You have to go all the way down to just above Douglas fir, the third from the bottom, before you hit black walnut. So as a hardwood, quote unquote hardwood deciduous tree, black walnut is really quite soft, and it's just a little harder than Doug fir, which is obviously we refer to that as a softwood. So there's a difference. We got a hardness difference between the wood. Anybody who's done woodworking will know that. Okay, that yeah, this is a nice, easy to work with, very, very, very soft wood on walnut. Other names for the maple, Acer saccharum, common names. It's called sugar maple, obviously. Okay, it's also called hard maple or rock maple. Both of the latter are kind of indicating that it is a very, very, very hard wood. One of the major uses of sugar maple is bowling alleys, because you can throw these balls at it all the day, dropping them down on that wood without overly damaging it. Another difference, walnut is relatively fast growing. Sugar maple is relatively slow growing. Maybe because they generally fast growing, generally slow growing. We know that, site, genetics, many factors come into the growth of a tree. But walnut trees tend to really grow pretty darn quickly. Sugar maple trees tend to grow pretty slowly. And this is a walnut that Kate and I dissected basically. And what you're looking at here is a tapped region. Okay, that's a tap hole. You can see where the tap hole was there, and you can see the area that's been compartmentalized or basically no longer actively live sapwood. Sapwood is live, heartwood is dead. Well, that's a dead area associated with that with that tap hole. We see that in maple as well as in walnut. But that tree was tapped in March, okay? And it was cut down in September. So that's one growing season on that tree after it was tapped. Now in maple, we say, man, if we can close off a tap hole on a maple tree in 2 years, that's pretty good. Up north where I came from, it's going to take you 3 years to close off a tap. Down in Ohio and Pennsylvania, down here, we can certainly do it in 2. But this is 1 year. And not only did it close off that tap in 1 year, it put on a 1 inch of new growth over the tap hole. And if you look at the annual rings, it's a little tough to see on this slide, I know, but those average about ½ inch of radial growth per year on that walnut tree. So this is fast growing. This tree is really putting on growth. You'd never expect a maple to grow that fast. Okay, so that's another factor that's going to have to factor in as you start thinking about how to approach tapping a walnut tree. That's going to be a little different than a maple tree. So we've got hardwood, we've got and beyond a sapwood, we've got the growth rate, and we've got the hardness as 3 things that are going to be different when you approach tapping your walnut trees. But there are more. Okay, let's take a look at the more. The vascular tissue. This would make a forester's heart go pitter patter. Okay, we're getting into some stuff you all had in wood technology in your schooling days here. Maple is what we refer to as a diffuse porous hardwood. So this is a sugar maple, and you can see there are set annual rings kind of moving horizontally. I can see 2 of them in here. And you can see the rays going up and down vertically on this cross section. And then you see these light dots. Those are all the pores or the vessels in the wood. And the vessels in maple are distributed evenly throughout that annual ring. You just take a look at it. There are dots throughout, pretty evenly distributed throughout the annual ring. Well, those pores, those vessels, they transport water and nutrients up the tree, and they also transport sap to your tap. So they transport sap to your tap. You can see they're evenly distributed. All right, that's the vascular tissue in a maple. Now we're going to look at the other end of this spectrum. We say this is a diffuse porous hardwood. We're going to look now at not walnut, but we're going to look at the other extreme, which is called a ring porous hardwood. This happens to be red oak. All right. And here, take a look at the one on the left or the right, doesn't make any difference. Obviously, you've got your rays, okay, and you've got an annual ring. The annual ring on this starts at the large holes, and you can see the large holes, the large pores or the vessels are all in the springtime. And then as you move through the annual ring, the wood gets denser, and there are few, if any, pores or vessels as you move into the summer wood. Then it stops because we have something called winter, okay? And then it starts again with the next annual ring in the spring. So if we've got a diffuse porous hardwood, this is the other end of the spectrum. This is a ring porous hardwood, okay? It's not walnut, but we're now looking at both extremes. Now we're going to take a look at what walnut looks like, okay, in the middle. We refer to walnut as a semi-ring porous hardwood. It means it's kind of a little bit like diffuse, and it's kind of a little bit like ring, all right? And if you look at this, on the bottom of this slide, this picture, there are big pores. And then you can see that as you move on up, they get smaller and smaller. If you look at the top, you can see that row of large pores that year even better. You can see that there's obviously a ring of large pores, and then you can't see it further on up, but the size of the pores decreases as you move through the summer. they've got some of the characteristics of my diffuse porous hardwood, some of the characteristics of my ring porous hardwood, some of each. Now, one thing you should know is that in theory, any diffuse porous hardwood, okay, any tree, we'll just drop back here a little bit, any tree that has a vascular structure like this can be tapped and will produce a sweet sap in the springtime. Any of these guys can, all right? You can produce sap and make syrup out of any maple. You can make it out of box elder. That's a maple, okay? Sugar maple, red maples, black maples, the silver maple, keep on going. Any of them will produce a sweet sap. You can also make it out of birch, okay? Another diffuse porous hardwood. You can make it out of beech, another diffuse porous hardwood. Kate's on this call. She's made sap, collected sap, made syrup out of sycamore, another diffuse porous hardwood. We'll go back here to our walnut and we say, and you can make it out of a semi-ring porous hardwood, out of one that has some of the characteristics of our diffuse porous and some of the characteristics of our ring porous. Now, we only have two semi-ring porous woods. We've got juglans, which is butternut and black walnut, and we have the Illinois hickory. Those are the two semi-ring porous trees in this country, and both of them, in theory, okay, you can think of, there aren't any others, will produce sap as well. But they've got some of that ring porous characteristic, some of the diffuse porous characteristics. We're going to see how that comes into play as we move forward. Okay, 5. Another difference between walnut and sugar maple that is going to affect how you approach this tapping game is walnut's got really thick bark, and sugar maple has relatively thin bark. Okay, a mature walnut tree has got big, thick ridges. A maple tree, even a mature maple tree, the sugar maple tree, or actually any maple tree, is relatively thin barked, and that's going to impact how you go about tapping those trees. All right, sap flow physiology. Okay, this is something that I enjoy thinking about immensely. Most people probably don't. But why does the tree in the springtime, certain trees have sap flow? By the way, diffuse porous hardwoods, as I said, any of them can be tapped and give you a sweet sap in the spring. Ring porous hardwoods cannot, all right? You can tap an oak tree all you want, and all you're going to do is get dry holes, or a hickory tree or an ash tree, okay? They don't do it, but diffuse porous hardwoods do, all right? And maple, now, the reason why when you put a hole in a maple tree in the springtime and you tap a tap into it, the reason why it gives sap, why sap flows out of that tap, all right, is that there's an internal stem pressure in that tree. The tree is building up a pressure in its stem, all right? And just like, if you went out and drilled a hole in the tire of your car, the air would flow out because the pressure inside the tire is greater than the atmospheric pressure outside. I don't suggest doing that, by the way. But but anytime you have a pressure differential, you're gonna have a flow when you tap into that. And in the springtime, maples develop this internal pressure, stem pressure. And those of you who signed up and said, hey, I'm a maple producer, okay, that this stem pressure is developed based on freeze-thaw cycles, okay? That those days when it goes below freezing at night and then above freezing during the day, get down into the upper 20s at night, get up to the upper 30s and 40s during the day. Those are the days that that you have a sap flow. Those are sap flow days. All right. That's interesting. And that's really cool. And what's really happening there, just for fun, is that the tree is basically building up pressure to dissolve gases in its vessels. The tree vessels are full of gases in the fall and the winter, and it's got to get rid of them so that it can transport water and nutrients up to its leaves in the springtime when the buds break. And so before the buds break, before the leaves come out, it's got to clear out those vessels, and basically gases under pressure dissolve. And that's the reason why the trees doing this. So maple trees, beech, birch, sycamore, they develop a stem pressure. All right. Slide over to the right-hand side of your screen. Birch trees, actually I shouldn't, they don't all develop stem pressure. They all develop pressure. Birch trees develop root pressure, not stem pressure. Different physiological process. A maple runs when the temperatures are down below freezing at night and above freezing during the day, that temperature fluctuation. If you tap birch, okay, and there's lots of people who do, it doesn't run until you're done with that freeze-thaw cycle, okay? Until the maple folks have put away their taps and cleaned things up, or actually towards the end of that period. It's not a straight line, but as they develop their pressure due to root pressure, a whole different process of building pressure up in trees. And unlike maple, where when it's thaw cycle is on, when it's warm during the day, you're getting sap flow. When it freezes, you don't. With birch, once it starts, it's like turning a faucet on in your bathroom. It doesn't stop until you turn it off, or until the tree turns it off, seals up that hole in one way. So they develop root pressure, whole different physiological process to build up pressure to do the same thing. The thing is to clean out those bubbles, those air bubbles or gas bubbles from their vessels, but they do it differently, and thusly the sap flows at a different time of the year. Walnut is somewhere in the middle. A number of folks back in the early 2000s in France working on walnut plantations with no interest at all in tapping walnut trees, but they were it's a physiology group over there, did some work on walnut, and they found that walnuts develop stem pressure, freeze thaw, and root pressure. Okay, and that's going to impact obviously how and when you might tap these trees. All right, it's gonna. So we've got something in the middle. Walnuts set right in the middle of the vascular system, and they set right in the middle of the sap flow physiology spectrum there. All right, that's interesting. Okay. Volume of sap per tap. All right. Walnut does not give you a lot of sap per tap. Okay. A walnut tree will give you, we found about, you can count on 2 gallons of sap on each tap. Okay. Maple, okay, is going to give you 10 to 20 gallons of sap per tap, depending on how and sometimes more. All right. Depending on how you're gathering, what your system is. There's been a study, and I say a study because it's only one, and that whenever there's been one study, obviously we need replication of that. And it had shown that the amount of sap a walnut tree produces is related to the thickness of the sapwood. In maple, the relationship is not the thickness of the sapwood, because maple's got lots of sapwood. It's the diameter of the tree. So on the right hand, you see we've got one of my students there and her little daughter measuring the diameter of the tree. And the larger diameter maple trees are going to give you more sap per tap. That's a relationship that was developed through research up at the Proctor Maple Research Labs. Walnut doesn't work that way. Walnut, your volume of sap on this one study was most closely correlated to the thickness of the sap wood. Now that's interesting, okay? It's interesting because a young tree, take a look at the one in the bottom, oftentimes has a lot thicker sapwood than an old tree, the one on the left, okay? That makes for an interesting relation. Got to give us a little thought on this, okay? Finally, another difference between walnut and maple that you couldn't see when you saw that first slide. Walnut sap has pectin. All right. Maple sap does not. Beech sap has pectin. Who would have thunk? But it does, okay? My friends at Cornell have figured that out. Pectin is a natural substance in plants, and it's a glue that helps to glue the cell walls together, hold one cell to another, okay? So it's common. What do we use pectin for? There's a rhetorical question. Well, anybody who's out there who's making jams and jellies knows that there's certain fruits that have a lot of pectin naturally in that fruit, and you're gonna be able to make jam and jelly from that. And there's other fruits that you got to buy some commercial pectin and augment it in order to get it to gel. So what does pectin do? It gels, okay? It causes a solution to gel, okay? And basically, pectin in an acid environment, in the presence of sugars and heat, forms a gel. It forms jelly. It forms jams. Pectin's a very long chain polysaccharide. Saccharides are sugars, long chain sugar, okay, with a really high molecular weight. I didn't ask anybody if they were a chemist out there. Molecular weight of pectin is between 60,000 and 120,000 grams per mole. That's just heavy stuff. Molecular weight of water is about 180, okay? So it's really, really heavy stuff. And in terms of making walnut sap and syrup, it's really a problem, because sometimes you don't end up making walnut syrup, you end up making walnut jelly, which may be okay. I've never tried it or tried to sell it. And oftentimes, those of you who are in the maple business, again, know what you want to do to your sap is first run it through a reverse osmosis, RO, to increase the concentration of the sugars naturally occurring in maple trees. We'd like to do that with walnut trees too, but those long chains on this polysaccharide really cause problems with our RO membranes. So we can't really RO it, which is a problem when it comes to making walnut syrup. And on the other side, when you've made this syrup, you want to run it through a filter press, and that pectin does the exact same thing on that filter press. It'll glom up your press and cause problems in filtering the syrup at the other end of the line. So pectin's an issue, and it's an issue that is going to require some work to try to figure our way through that. So walnut sap has pectin. Why walnut does and maple doesn't, I couldn't tell you. It's a good question, but I couldn't tell you. In fact, with walnut sap and syrup production, we're gonna find that there are more questions than there are answers. Okay. Look, here's the Proctor Maple Research Center, University of Vermont, up in Underhill, Vermont, and they've been working to try to figure out how maple trees think. They've been trying to get their heads into maples. And they've been trying to figure out ways to help increase maple syrup production since 1946. That's a long time. I know that because I was born in 1946. That's a long time ago, all right? They've been doing this for a long time. And those of you, again, in the maple industry have seen the results of both the work there, the work at Cornell, the work at the Acer Center in Canada. We've come a long way, baby, when it comes to our knowledge and our ability to make sap, to produce sap and make syrup for maple trees. It's not like it was in 1946. We're way, way forward, and it's been a great advances in the industry. All right, long time we've been looking at this. We've been asking questions. We've been solving problems for a long time. Here's the oldest article that I can find, and I've looked, specifically about tapping walnut trees. And this is 2006, done by Gary Naughton at the University of Kansas on a plantation out there. The first attempt to try to figure something out about walnuts and walnut sap flow and walnut syrup. That's not a long time. That's not 1946. We're in the infancy of trying to figure out how to make walnut sap, get walnut sap and make walnut syrup. We've got many more questions than we have answers. And you know, I'm at the point I'm inviting anybody, Ohio friends, researchers, university types, to take a look at some of this stuff, because there's not a lot of literature there. There's a lot of questions, and we need a lot of answers. We got to catch up to maple in order to move forward. Now, a lot of what they learned in maple obviously is applied to walnut, but as we've seen by the 7 or 8 slides I showed you earlier, there's a lot about walnut that's really different from maple. Okay, and it's those differences that we've got to try to figure out, and we've got to try to work our way around and address. By the way, we haven't got it all figured out for maple either, and that's a good thing. All right, so I work for Future Generations University. All right, and I've got a question for you. Question number 3. Marnie, pull up that poll. Have you ever heard of Future Generations University? No. Yes. Come on, yes. Come on, yes. My golly. 92% of you have not. Okay, that doesn't surprise me. Future Generations University is located in Franklin, West Virginia. How many have heard of Franklin, West Virginia? Let's ask that question. This is kind of fun for me. Okay. All right. So most people never heard of Franklin. That really kind of, bothers me. That hurts my heart here. Okay. There's not a lot of people. Well, let me tell you about Franklin. There's 700 people who live here. All right. And we're the county seat of Pendleton County, and there are 7,000 people who live in Pendleton County. And Franklin has, the whole county has one stoplight. All right. So you're not in Ohio out here. You're in the back hills of West Virginia. And it doesn't surprise me that many people haven't heard of it. Let's go back to Future Generations. I'm going to get rid of this and tell you a little bit about this organization I work for. Retired from, and then now seem to be back employed with once again. It's located on top of North Mountain, just outside of Franklin, West Virginia. It's you're looking at the university there. Okay, all 3 buildings. All right. It is probably, I guarantee you, those of you who are in the maple business or others, that we are the only organization engaged in trying to advance the maple industry that also has an office in Kabul, Afghanistan, Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and Lhasa, Tibet. I can guarantee you that. We're the only maple organization out there. And believe it or not, I just checked this the day before yesterday. Our office in Kabul, Afghanistan is still operating, still in business. So what is this group, and why on earth are they? Do Kate and I work there and are way interested in maple syrup? All right. Future Generations is first of all, it is a recognized, accredited educational institution, not only in the state of West Virginia, but we are through the Higher Learning Commission up in Chicago, Illinois. We have our accreditations, the same as the University of Ohio, I'm sure, certainly the same as WVU. So we are fully accredited. We run a master's degree program with students from around the world, all people who are practitioners of community change, involved in community development. Okay. And it's an online and field residential master's. So we go out and visit some of these places and work with people. And it's located right in Appalachia. Now I know if Les Ober's on this call, I went out there and he claims that he's also located in Appalachia. But, Ohio to me, guys, is what my friends call topographically challenged. Okay. You come to West Virginia, we'll show you what hills look like. They're unbelievably steep. But we're located in Appalachia and have always been here, I mean, for decades, but never really very much engaged with our local communities. And the opportunity came available for us to give some assistance to the budding maple industry in the state. We took it up, and now we are in partnership with some prestigious organizations like Ohio State, Penn State, okay, WVU, and we work with our partners and try to promote and advance the maple industry, particularly, or at least mostly in West Virginia. When I came on board here, we had 12 members of our association. Now we've got 50 paid members, 65 actually on the books. I'm sure that's nothing compared to Ohio, but that's, we're talking about 2014 starting this whole thing up here. And so it's been a pretty cool ride and pretty cool growth of our industry, and it's growing. So that's really good. All right, so that's a little bit about Future Generations. Now, tomorrow, when you're walking down the street or you walk into your office and somebody says to me, so have you ever heard of Future Generations University? You can say, of course. And you'll probably be the only one in the room who has. All right. Are we supposed to be here? Yeah, I think so. Anyhow, part of what we've been doing is looking at some of the issues related to, let me just go forward here a little bit. I'm missing a slide. I don't know why, but let me tell you why. I'm just going to talk at you now a little bit, okay? Let me tell you why we got involved in walnut, okay? And I know some foresters out there saying, please don't, why would you ever do that? All right. Walnut sap and syrup production. We got involved in walnut sap and syrup production because we hosted a symposium down here in 2017. Les came to it, all right, as did people from throughout the maple world. And we started to talk about, we got into discussions about, what we needed to know in order to advance and promote our industry in the southern tier of maple producing states. And we're still involved in this, okay? Which is why I'm in phone calls with Kathy and Les, certainly once a month, often more, as we work together on these issues. How do we promote? How do we advance it? Not up in Vermont, not up in Maine, not up in upper state New York, but what do we need to advance this industry down here where we live in the more southerly tier? And out of that symposium, we had Mike Farrell down, Abby Vandenberg down. We talked about the alternative market, okay, for alternative tree species. Now, we're all in a foodie economy. Specialty foods, alternative foods, interesting tastes are exactly what we want to focus on. And hold on just a second. Those things will drive me nuts. Anyhow, there have been a growing interest in among some of our northern folks about tapping alternative species. All right. And we knew we needed some more knowledge about this. And my friends from up north looked at me and said, well, you're here. You should be taking the lead and finding this out. And so we did. Okay. We took on that challenge and started to look at this. We began some research studies with Kate, who's on this call with me, on walnut sap flow and walnut syrup production. At the same time, we began some research studies on sycamore sap flow and sycamore syrup production. We did that because I happened to be at a maple meeting down in downstate Lincoln County, West Virginia, and I was talking about different trees that theoretically give sap. Nobody I know had ever tasted sycamore syrup or made it. And this one lady raised her hand and says, I grew up on sycamore syrup. What are you talking about? And she let me know that her grandparents down in southern West Virginia routinely tapped sycamore trees. And then we found other people down there. So was a history and a culture of sycamore tapping that had pretty much subsided, and we wanted to bring that back. So we began some studies on walnut, and I know my forestry friends will say, don't put a hole in a walnut tree. We'll talk about that later. And we began some studies on sycamore. And my forestry friends will say, I don't care what you do to a sycamore tree. That doesn't have much value. Okay. And started making sap and syrup from both of those. So we're going to go on now and think about why we might want, this is the slide that's missing. So you're going to have to visualize this. All right. In your mind, I want you to visualize this map of the eastern United States, and we're going to think about where walnut trees grow. All right. And if you had that map in your mind, you'd find that the area of walnut range, okay, is going to be Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, okay, up into Pennsylvania. And then it's going to start to peter out as you go further north up into New York, Vermont, Maine, New Hampshire, up in there. So if you looked at that map and you look what was right in the middle of the walnut growing region of the country, the range map for black walnut, Juglans nigra, you're going to find that Ohio is right smack dab there. Man, there's not a county in your state that isn't chalked in as walnut area, growing walnut trees. On the other hand, if you go up into New England, okay, into maple country, into Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, there is not a lot of walnut trees up there, guys. It just isn't there. So if there's a market, if there's a growing demand for walnut syrup, I like to tell people, West Virginia is never going to compete with Vermont or New England in general when it comes to maple syrup production. We got a lot of trees, but hey, those guys have got the name recognition, they've got the market. But for walnut syrup, for sycamore syrup, they don't have the trees. The resource, where's the resource? It's here in those southern tier states. It's our area that if this is going to develop, the potential, the resource potential is there. For landowners on this talk, think about your property. The resource potential has much higher probability of being in your land down here than in the land I own in upstate New York, in which I can't tell you of one walnut tree in the whole county. All right, so that's why we got into this. Now we're gonna go through some of the research that we've been doing over the last 3 years, and kind of tie that to those specific unique properties of walnut, and how we're trying to find some answers to some questions that need to be answered to move this industry, this potential industry forward. All right. Well, we said earlier that walnut has soft wood and thick bark. That's a problem if you're gonna tap it. All right. It's a problem because basically all the spiles, all the spouts, all the taps that are made for maple have a barrel that is a little short for tapping into walnut. Oftentimes you'll sink that spile all the way into the tree before you get a good seal. All right. So the bark thickness is an issue. All right. And then the other issue is the softness of the wood. You know, again, go back to my maple folks, the 20% of you, whoever on this call, you tap that tree until the hammer bounces off the spile, until the pitch of the spile, the pitch that comes with hitting it raises, and you know you've got a good seat on that spile. All right. Now we know that if you drive that spile in too deep, and if you don't know this, maple folks, you should. If you drive that spile in too deep, you're sealing off vascular tissue, all those diffuse pores, and you're reducing your sap flow. Okay. We did some research on that down here. That was corroborated by work up at Proctor. And yes, driving the spile in too deep seals off vessels, reduces sap flow. You want to get it just right. The problem with walnut being a softer wood is by the time you do get it just right, okay, those same cues that we had with maple, the spile's in too deep. You've already sealed off much of that vascular tissue. And remember, in walnut, you had a very thin layer of sapwood to begin with. If you start sealing it off by driving the spile in too deep, you're really decreasing your production. Okay, fair enough. So the first year, 2019, I hired Kate. Kate and I went out and we designed some studies and went out and designed a spout that was a longer barreled spout. Okay, it was 3/4 inch longer barrel. It's the one on the right, and also had more taper. The traditional, typical maple spile right now is very low taper. Those of you who do anything on buckets know that your spiles are much more highly tapered on a bucket. The spiles you buy now commercially tend to be very, very low taper, basically straight barreled. And one of the reasons they've gone to that is because it tends to split the wood less, which was a problem with drilling into a frozen maple tree. Drive into a frozen maple tree, it's with a highly tapered spile, and it's like, you know, driving a wedge into a frozen block of wood. It's going to split the wood. So they reduce the taper on that. But on walnut, that's a problem because you drive the spile in too deep. So we put the taper back on the spile, and we increased the barrel length so it didn't sink in all the way to the bark or beyond before it's seeded. And then we went out and we worked with 4 farmers trying our new spiles, the ones on the left, the walnut specific, comparing it production wise to the ones that they were using on the right, the typical maple. Now these are folks who are in West Virginia who are presently, now what are we doing here? Tapping walnut trees. And we'll just take a look at this. And Chip Matheny, using his maple spile, got 15 gallons of sap over the season. He got 32 gallons on his walnut spiles. Okay. Each one, by the way, had 10 trees on these studies. Christoph Herby, 1527. Elton Bowers, oh man, isn't that interesting? He got 20 on his maple spouts and 19 on the walnut spouts. Karen Mills, 9 and 13. So in general, and you know, these trees are as individual as you and I are. We're all different, okay? And I don't know what happened at Elton's place, but it wasn't consistent with the other 3 places. But in general, we had if you looked at average all those up, you had a 54% increase in sap flow using a walnut specific spile. That's not surprising. I mean, Proctor's been working since the 40s, right? Designing, working with industry and coming up with just the right spile. And nobody knows what the right spile. It's like the right mousetrap, okay? Every manufacturer out there will tell you theirs is better than the competition's. But here we go. We can come up with something specific to walnut and get a 50% increase in sap flow. Well, that was pretty cool. All right. Don't know what's going on there. All right. In 2020, we continued this work and we said, hey, look, if we can get, and those were all done on buckets. That first study was done in buckets. If we could put some vacuum onto these trees, again, we know that one maple application of vacuum to your line changes the pressure differential inside and outside the tree, and the tree produces more sap. So in 2020, we put some walnut trees on vacuum and had some that were not on vacuum, and said, well, let's see how much, if vacuum in fact increases productivity on these walnut trees. So what we did is we had 10 trees on the B line, which we called our 20 taps on the B line and 20 taps on the A line. All right. And when both these lines, we just collected the sap coming off of them. When both of them were on gravity flow, the 63% of the runs on the A line were higher than the B line. So again, trees are individual. Each tree is doing its own thing out there. With no gravity, or with no vacuum, everything strictly on gravity flow, the A line consistently outproduced the B line. If you put 10 maple trees here and 10 maple trees over there on two lines, they're going to produce different amounts of sap. Okay. So without, just on gravity, no vacuum, A is outproducing B. Then what we did is we put vacuum on the B line. So A line stayed on gravity. That was the high production line. The B line we put on vacuum, and we did numerous runs, and we used just a small diaphragm vacuum pump and a battery out in the woods. All right. Not high vacuum by any means, just some vacuum out there. And if you just look down in this chart on the average on the right-hand side, we can see that our gravity line, which had been the high producing line, produced 0.37 quarts per hour. Our B line, the low producing line with vacuum, produced 0.74. All right. So basically we doubled production on our walnut, sap production on our walnuts by the application of vacuum. That shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. All right. Maple folks have known this for a long time. That's why most of them are running their operations on vacuum. But the interesting thing here is we had 100% increase in sap flow on 8 inches of vacuum. That's all we could get with this little pump on the end of that line, those 20 taps. 8 inches of vacuum, 100% increase in sap flow. You won't get 100% increase in sap flow with 8 inches of vacuum on maple. You got to go significantly higher to get that. All right, so that's the next year. That was 2020. So we said we've just shown in 2019 we showed we can increase sap flow with a walnut specific spile. 2020 we just showed we can put some vacuum, not a whole lot, on these lines and increase sap flow 100%. What's the logical next question? Well, if you can get 100% increase in sap flow on 8 inches of vacuum, what do you think you could if you increase the vacuum even further? Now, to do this, we had to go from this little diaphragm pump, and we had an operator now that installed a honest vacuum pump and releaser onto his operation. So he was able to pull a lot more vacuum on his lines, and we were able to take advantage of that, hook up our 2 research lines and run another series of tests. So first of all, we ran a series of on our 20 taps with the same amount of vacuum on each line. All right, A line, upper line, B line, lower line. Each one had 15 inches of vacuum, equal vacuum. And here again, A line outproduced B line, A outproduced B, A outproduced in 4 different sap runs. The A line was outproducing the B line. In fact, the A line gave 57% more sap than the B line on these 4 experimental runs on this thing. So just like we did the year before, same trees, same setup, with 0 vacuum, the A outproduced the B. With 15 inches of vacuum, equal vacuum on both, the A outproduced the B. A-line trees simply are giving more, more sap than B-line trees. So then what we did is we said, we're going to drop the A-line to 0 and put the B-line up to 22 inches of vacuum, which is all we could get on this vacuum system. And we did 4 runs on that. Now, the first run, they were all the same. The the 22 inches and the zero didn't show any difference at all. The next 3 sap runs, all right, we had increases on the B over the A. A's no vacuum, B's 22 inches. A's no 22, no 22. In fact, B line now produced 23% more sap than the A line. So what it did is it made up the 50-some% that it was naturally down and added 23% more on that system. All right. We did this to set up some background so we could then do what we really wanted to do, which was the next slide, and that's basically vary the vacuum on these two. The next slide, we put 10 inches of vacuum on the A line, and because of the way the system was set up, it dropped our B line vacuum to 17. Maple folks, you got 10 inches on one line, you got 17 on the other. Which is going to produce more sap? Same number of taps on similar trees on both lines. Your answer is going to be the B line. Higher vacuum, higher sap flow. That's kind of how it works in maple. The higher your vacuum, your higher sap flow. But take a look at what we saw here. On our first run, the A line way outproduced the B line, even though B line had more vacuum. The second run, the third run, the fourth run, the fifth run, again, trees are individuals. Who knows what they're thinking of? But here now the B line outproduced the A line. But in general, when you average across those things, the lower vacuum on the A line produced more sap, 45% more sap, than the higher vacuum on the B line. That's not what I would expect in maple. That's interesting. Okay, that's not what I would expect in maple. And so the question becomes, how come? What's going on? Why did that happen? Was it right? Shouldn't it be duplicated? Somebody else should do this again and see if that happens again. Maybe it was just an anomaly. Maybe I screwed up in my research design. Who knows? Okay, lots of different questions here. And they're questions that may take us the next 50 years to help figure out. That's how long Proctor's been working on this stuff. We've only been doing it for a couple of years here, but they're good questions, okay? And they're questions that, hey, I'd love to have Ohio State run something and see what you get over there. See what happens. We just don't know. One of my hypotheses that really needs to be tested out is this. Okay. Imagine this. Go back to those semi-ring porous, diffuse porous wood. In the semi-ring porous, we have those large pores as well as the small pores. They're full of air bubbles in the winter, gas bubbles in the winter. Early on in 2019, we did some observations. Kate did, all right. And she noted that in a maple line under vacuum, most of what's running down that line, I think it was 82%, is sap and some gases. In a walnut line under vacuum, it's just the opposite. It's mostly gases and not much sap. And I think it's mostly gases because of those big vessels, okay, in the sapwood. It's those big vessels in the annual ring. Anyhow, what we could be doing here as we increase our vacuum is just pulling more air, more gases out of those large vessels and not actually pulling more sap. I liken it in my mind to finishing up a milkshake at McDonald's, okay, or wherever you like to drink your milkshakes. You got a little bit down there in the bottom and you got your straw in your mouth and you suck really, really quickly. What do you get? You get a lot of air and not a whole lot of milkshake off the bottom of the thing. If you slow down, suck a little less quickly, you can actually get clean off the bottom of that milkshake, get the last of that milkshake without swallowing nearly as much air. So it's possible with those large vessels, with this vascular structure, that increasing vacuum simply draws more air out of the tree or more gases out of the tree than having a lower vacuum. That's a hypothesis. Let's test it. All right, Here's something I'm gonna show you if I can get it to work. Remember we said that walnut is both stem pressure and root pressure. All right, it's kind of like birch and it's kind of like maple. And we said that root pressure in birch comes to play in the springtime after the sap flow season is over. All right, take a look at this slide. First thing I want you to notice is the green grass. All right, this is well after the maple season is over. The freeze thaw cycles are done. All right, and remember I said that. Okay, come on, you silly thing. I said that on average, we can get 2 gallons of sap from a walnut tree. This is a video. Maple folks, is that a good sap flow? What do you think? I think it's pretty darn good. That's walnut, okay? And that's walnut sap flow about 3 weeks after the maple sap flow is finished and the freeze thaw cycles are finished. So with walnut, we still got to look at the question. That was 2 years ago. We didn't see that last year. We still ask the question is it better to tap in the maple season or in the birch season, during the freeze thaw cycles or after the freeze thaw cycle? That video was after the freeze thaw cycles, okay? We still have a lot to learn and a lot of work to do to answer some of those questions. So that is our discussion of walnut sap flow and syrup production. It's different from maple. In many ways, it's going to have to be treated differently. I got pectin in the stuff, and that's causing all sorts of problems in the syrup production side of things. By the way, Future Generations is working with the Robert C. Byrd Institute of Advanced Manufacturing to manufacture a reasonably priced walnut tap. We hope to have some out this year on our trees. We're also working with Marshall University on a project to identify and minimize pectin in sap and syrup using centrifuges. Remember I said how heavy the molecule was of that pectin compared to water, 60,000 versus 180 grams per mole? Well, we're hoping to be able to use centrifuges to eliminate or minimize the amount of pectin in that sap to solve that problem. So again, there's lots of problems. There's lots of issues. But why even bother? Why would someone want to do this? Okay. We started messing around with it. Now we got a guy down in Highland County, Virginia, who's got close to 500 taps. We got a guy up here in Franklin who's got 384, wants to expand. We got 2 other guys up on Pendleton County who've got 400 walnut trees. One of them, I think Gary has got more than that, wants to put them online this year. So why on earth would you want to do this to a perfectly good walnut tree? There's the missing slide. All right, now you see Ohio, and you can see the obvious resource distribution around there. We got walnut trees, guys. The boys up north simply don't. Okay. Here's one reason. You can go online. There's a web address down there, and this is Twanelay Farm. He's down, Christoph Herbie down in Virginia, and he made walnut syrup this year. You go on his website and you take a look at his black walnut syrup, and what's it say? Out of stock. He's already sold it all. Okay. And then you can see what he does have is he's got a maple walnut blend. And most walnut syrup right now is going into a maple walnut blend. You'd have a hard time buying pure walnut syrup. I know you can get some, but it'd be hard. It's generally hard to come up. But maple walnut blends are the way people are doing it. People know about maple walnut. You've been eating the ice cream for decades, right? So you know it's good stuff, and it's got curb appeal, as they say in the real estate business, when it's sitting on a shelf. Okay, so that's one reason, high demand. Here's new leaf maple. This is Mike Farrell's operation. All right. Now, a bottle, we did some market research on an earlier ACER grant in the Shenandoah Valley and found that a bottle of maple syrup, 12-ounce bottle, is selling for $8 to $9. There's a range, but the average was $8.72 for a 12-ounce bottle. Farrell is selling a maple walnut syrup, 12-ounce bottle, $18. I call that value added, guys. When you can take an $8.72 bottle of maple syrup and market it for $18, that's not too bad. Now that's a 10% blend, 10% walnut, 90% maple, and look at the price differential. Okay, so the price is there, all right. The syrup, the demand is there. Here's Salt City Maple up in Syracuse, specialty place. You can, yeah, I'm not sure what they market this for, but they've got sugar maple syrup and Norway maple, black walnut, butternut syrup, and people are buying these things for gifts. Okay, it allows our maple producers to move into, you know, put another product on the shelf, move into a little bit of a different market, add some value to their product. Okay, these are all reasons why one might consider tapping a walnut tree. Okay, and then if you want to really add value, look at this. This is bourbon barrel aged walnut syrup, finished in a second barrel used to store black walnut syrup. So this isn't even walnut syrup in there. All they did is stick it in a barrel that used to have walnut syrup, and they're marketing a black walnut bourbon. And the price of that ain't half bad either. All right. So lots of different coming markets, existing markets, foodie markets, specialty markets are coming online for people who have walnut syrup. So demand. That's one reason. Foresters, gasp. Okay. Here's what we all think of, and I'm one of you. All right. We all think of when we think of a walnut tree. Oh man, that's to make the heart. There's your $30,000 tree, Kathy. Make the heart go pitter pat, right? Down bottomland species, growing amongst other species down there. There's a lot of maple leaves on there. I can see that. Growing tall and straight, not a branch for, I don't know, a good long time. Am I telling you to go and drill a hole in that tree? No. Okay, I'm not. But all walnut trees don't look like that. West Virginia. If I want to look for walnut trees, I look up on the ridge tops. All right. We've got them down in, they're mixed species down the ravines, and they're growing just like that last one there. But there are pure stands on our ridges, on our upper slopes. And you look at those trees, they're not nearly, 6 logs and 30 inches in diameter. They're old pasture walnuts, okay, spread out there by some enterprising squirrel who, didn't have a good memory and forgot where he buried his nuts. And, but they're all over. They're upper slope, a lot of branches lower on down, big crowns, okay, not narrow crown, open grown trees. Well, guess what? Big crowns, lots of leaves, open grown, lots of branches. That's good maple stuff. Okay. That's good sap production stuff. It's not terribly good veneer timber stuff. Not to say that there's not a log on the bottom of each of those trees, but it's not what we classically think of as our dear to the heart walnut tree. Okay, here's some other walnut trees. This is down in Virginia. Now we all know what that big veneer log that I showed you there, what that looked like, right? Okay, we can all imagine having those all over our farms, which we probably don't. Okay, but here's a walnut tree that's tapped. That's probably 8 inches in diameter. What's the value of that tree? Okay, right now, how much would you give me if I wanted to buy that walnut tree? And you'd find that that's not really very much. Not to say it's not going to grow, not to say, but at this point in time, that's not your classic veneer log there. All right. And as Kathy said at the beginning of this, there's a lot of walnut that are not. Okay. But a lot of walnut that simply aren't. Even though I know the markets are great, there's still a lot of walnut that are not. We can tap these. Okay. In fact, if you think about it, that tree there might just, I know it does, in fact, because we cut down one of those. A tree like that has got a thicker sapwood region than that veneer log does, because it's fast growing, it's new, it's moving real fast, and it's going to have a really thick, which means it's going to have a high production potential from those small, more scrawny trees than the bigger ones. All right, I go to Silvex for North America for information. I use it all the time. All right. And I went in when I was preparing this presentation, and they said in there, if you read on through, that in Indiana, you can get an 8.3-inch diameter walnut tree, seedling to 8.3-inch diameter in 14 years. Okay. And that in 50 years, I can grow a walnut tree that's 120 feet tall, 30 inches in diameter, veneer tree, perfectly wonderful in 50 years. All right. So that's coming out of Silvex. I mean, everybody's different. Your farm's different from my farm. You know, I've got them upper slope. You've got them in the ravines, you know, all sorts of differences in here. I'm going to make an assumption based on that little bit of Silvex research that we ought to be able to grow a 10-inch diameter walnut tree in 20 years. I think that's a pretty good assumption, that in 20 years, fast growing tree, we ought to be able to get 10 inches out of it. And we're going to say that you got to have a minimum diameter of 10 inches to tap. We don't know if that's true or not, because walnut's different than maple. But if we say that, we've got something to base it off of. Now let's take a look at the value of walnut syrup and take a look at its potential production. Think that last tree there, that scrawny little 6-8-inch diameter walnut tree. Well, I bought some walnut syrup last year from Mike Farrell, New Leaf, who got it from Salt City Maple, and I paid him $90 a quart for that syrup. And he said that's the same price that New Leaf charges him. $90 a quart, 4 quarts to a gallon, is $360 a gallon, is what Salt City Maple is getting for their walnut syrup. That's not too bad. Those of you in the maple business, price looks pretty good. Okay, a pint, half a quart, 45, a cup, half a pint, 8 ounces, $22.50. So you can get, nobody's done any science work on this, but people generally feel that you're going to get a cup of syrup out of a tree. Okay, if you tap a walnut tree, you can count on getting 1 cup of syrup out of it, $22.50. Oftentimes that's 2 spiles, but that's kind of the number that people work with. All right, you can take that tree, you can put a hole in it, you're going to get that scrawny tree, not the veneer tree. You can get $22.50 every year from that. And I just showed you that by using the new spiles, which I hope to have on the market here with Robert C. Byrd, you can increase that by 50%. Now that's worth $34.65. And you add in 8 inches of vacuum, we can double production. You don't need a big vacuum pump. 8 inches is not much. Now we're up to $69.30 per tree. Okay. Now this is just back of the envelope math and economics, obviously. If it takes me 10 years to get that, 20 years to get up to that 10-inch diameter tree, that means I got 30 years left before I got my veneer log on there, right? Between going from the tree that I'm standing next to and that other tree, it's going to take another 30 years. Now, there's my end product. That's 50 years from now. I'm a pretty patient guy, but I'm not interested in waiting 50 years. Remember, I told you I was born in 1936. I don't think I can wait 50 years for a payoff on this. Although, you know, my grandchildren might really appreciate it if I did. Okay. Now, if I put a hole in a tree like that 50 years later, it may have a reduction in value because of that. Probably does, but we don't know, because nobody's ever tried to sell one with a tap hole in it. We do know this: if it's tap hole maple, if you're up north and you cut down a maple tree has been tapped like that one I showed you earlier in the show, lots of spile spouts, it's not only doesn't have a deduction. Blue Ridge Lumber down here told me they don't have a deduction on maple, but it's got a premium because people like tap hole maple. Maybe 50 years from now, people will like tap hole walnut. I don't know. I can tap this pretty low, all right? There's some indication I could tap it right on the stump. I can tap it on the butt swell. Every tree's got a butt swell. I don't care if you're spinning it or you're cutting it, you're going to lose some butt swell. So what I'm saying is that, you know, there's a lot that we can take into consideration as we look at the costs and benefits of putting a hole in that tree. And actually, there's a graduate student out of WVU, Aaron Shaw, okay, who's starting to do some of this modeling and saying, okay, what are the trade-offs if we put a hole in there or not? And, you know, whatever the case may be. But here's what I'm doing. If I take that $69.30 and I get that every year for 30 years, while I'm waiting for my veneer log, I can bring in over $2,000, okay? Now, there's no guarantee that 10-inch, 8-inch diameter tree is even going to last to be for that veneer log. So the question becomes, what are we losing by sitting on the sidelines versus trying to gain some economic ability out of that, okay? Again, there's economists are going to discount this. They're going to look at various other factors. Aaron's going to work on that, and that's part of the final question on this. But in the meantime, I have one final question for you folks. Anyone got a drill? All right, that's it for me. It's your turn.
Gee, thanks, Mike. Now I know what you wanted the photo for.
I didn't want to get you in trouble with your friends, Kathy, but
oh, well, thank you. I think that was awesome.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and you're right. We foresters are like, oh, you know, this veneer tree that we could get. And in Ohio, we have a historical issue in that we had one tree sell in the 70s for $36,000, I think it was. And so after that, you know, the first limb was 50 feet off the ground, and I've got pictures of it. They took it out in one log because they wanted to show. But that historical price has stuck in people's minds. And as a field forester early in my career, people wanting to plant black walnut plantations because they wanted a plantation of $30,000 trees. And I kept saying, nice thought, but
so do I, right?
And I look at it actually here on my own property. I have black walnut that have nectaria canker. So they are not going to become huge, high dollar value walnut trees. You know, so I've got them. Do I just keep cutting them out to get rid of the canker, or do I perhaps look at something else with them? So I think it's great to talk about alternatives. And some of those prices were definitely pretty sweet.
Mhm.
So we do have some questions. Let's get in here. Okay, so I think you kind of touched on this, but Denise asked, can you do the same process that you're doing with black walnut and with butternut? And you had a thing of butternut syrup there, so.
And the answer is we have tapped, I think, 2 butternut trees, right, Kate? And boiled down to made syrup. I can't imagine. I know you can do the same process. It's got the same as black walnut. Yeah.
Okay. Nikki had just a question, close off with a question mark, and I probably missed that part early on in your presentation about closing off. Were you talking about maybe the?
I have 2 question marks in there. At one point, we were questioning some issues on sap flow and the vacuum on that. And what was the other one, Kate? You got a better memory than me. I don't know. We have to go back and look at it.
Of the
It was a
presentation.
closing off of section, yeah. A closing off with questions, because we've got more questions than we have answers on this, guys. You know, we need more work. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Jason, go ahead, Kate. Sorry.
I was just saying, where was that person trying to refer to the closing of a tap hole, the healing over?
Maybe that was what
Possibly.
Because it was early in the presentation. It was like at 10:15 or
timing would have been right
10:20.
there.
So that might have been.
Yeah, and we, at least from the logs that we've dissected at this point, and I added another one yesterday, we are seeing a much faster rate of tap hole closure in walnut than we are in maple, which, you know, could, basically the part of the reason we're dissecting logs is try to get some more data on what the scarring from tapping actually looks like in walnut, so we can establish tapping guidelines. And though this is all very much so new and not yet substantiated, we're seeing a lot less scarring in walnut than we are in maple, which could indicate that we could actually tap smaller trees, smaller diameter trees than you would necessarily in a maple.
That would be interesting. So Jason asks, how do you currently remove the pectin?
With difficulty, right, Kate? We can't remove it from the sap. What we can do, we have done is in the boiling process, we basically constantly filter it and remove it so you don't have as much at the end to screw up your filtering process. But I'll let Kate's the one who's done that. Yeah.
Yeah, so pectin, if any of you have made jelly or jam, you are familiar with this concept. As it boils and heats, you actually start creating longer and longer sugar chains, which is what that gelling action is. So during the boiling process of the sap, even though walnut sap itself looks pretty much just like maple sap, nice and clear, you start to actually see little jellyfish of pectin floating in your evaporator, which is always fun.
She coined that term, by the way. Okay, that's a West Virginia term for pectin floating in sap.
Yeah, I mean, it's what it looks like. But because of that, it's actually easier if you start the filtration process earlier in your boiling than you necessarily would. Because if you wait until the very end, you end up gumming up all your filters trying to push all that very set pectin out of the sap or finished syrup all at once. So what I do honestly is hang a cone filter over my pan and just ladle through that cone filter as I boil. And it just kind of helps start that filtration process, allowing for an easier final filtration.
Okay. Let's see. Jenny asks, if your overall goal is milling of the walnut trees, will tapping damage them for harvesting? And you've kind of answered that. We still have questions, just like so many things, but I think that's where most folks go when you talk about tapping walnut. It's like, oh, but what are you doing to my tree?
Exactly.
So Wade asked, how does walnut syrup taste when compared to maple syrup?
That's what I want to know.
Well, let's say this. I'll say something and let Kate fill in. People who grew up on maple, when they taste walnut, say, "Ooh, that's nice." Why don't you describe the taste?
Sure. The way I tend to describe it is a lot like maple syrup, but with more nutty and earthy undertones. You get some of that walnut flavor in the syrup itself. I would say if you like walnuts, you will definitely like the syrup, but it does have sort of those more like earthy, nutty tones to it than you would necessarily see in a traditional maple. Though I have to say the blends really help tone that down. So if you try straight walnut syrup and you're like, wow, this is way too much, that blend really kind of hides more of those earthy tones and just sort of brings out that nice nutty flavor.
And one thing I should add is if you have a nut allergy, the research has been done and the allergens are not in the syrup. The boiling process breaks down the proteins that cause the nut allergies.
Oh, wow.
Interesting.
Well, can say I, thanks to Mike, have tasted the sycamore syrup. And you gave us sycamore and then the sycamore maple blend. And I too would say the sycamore has somewhat more of a nutty flavor to it. And I really like the maple sycamore blend. I thought that to me was like spot on. That was really good. So there's definitely some interesting blends there. So we have a couple of questions that are asking the same thing as what's the ratio of sap to syrup? You know, we talk about 40 gallons of sap for a gallon of syrup.
I think it's, at least in West Virginia, our maple is around 1.5 bricks, and our walnut is 1.4, 1.5. We've gotten it from 1.1 to 1.5. It's kind of in that range, so it's not that different from our maple. When we seldom see 2 or 2.5 bricks maple. So if you could RO it, that would be wonderful. But we can't do that yet.
Yeah, I'd like to add, we have seen up to 2% walnut sap. So it's running pretty similarly to most maples.
Okay. Talked a little bit about Rick's asking the question, does walnut heal its tap holes as well as maple? But you haven't seen any overall health impacts of tapping walnuts?
We have not, but we've only been doing it for 3 years. So, but as Kate said in her studies, it really compartmentalizes much better than maple. It really does.
Which produces the most sap, black English or white walnut?
We've only worked with black here.
Okay. Does a tap tree still produce nuts? I would think so.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Be just like a maple still produces seeds.
Yes, it does.
And you've kind of talked about that. How do you process the sap? Any differences? Any major?
Except for the filtration, it's the same as maple.
Okay. Joe's asking, what is the best way to boil considering the pectin?
Just what Kate said, boil and then constantly filter it in the boiling process. Hang a cone filter over your sap tank or over your syrup tank, and then just, pan, and then just filter it through, catch the pectin.
Okay, so
We
Emily
hope to have a
asks,
centrifuge that'll do that. We hope to have a centrifuge that'll do that.
I was gonna
Really
say that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Was that in Kate's job description when you hired her, Mike?
That was
Other
quite a job
duties as
description.
assigned, Kate.
As I like to tell people, I found Kate hungry and unemployed on a mountaintop.
Yeah.
She'd have taken any job description we put together for her.
No. In a cow trailer in a field for a long time that year. So.
Called it a cow trailer. Yeah.
So Emily asks, in your professional opinion, when is the best time to tap black walnut?
What I would do right now is I would tap walnut at the same time as you're tapping maple, because we know that runs then and you get a crop. And that's what people are doing. I am watching and looking for a second run associated with the root pressure, but I can't say, I wouldn't know when to tell you to do it.
Okay. So if you thin your grove of walnuts, 12 to 14 inch trees for crop development, is it better to tap them then thin or thin then tap?
Well, once you're thin, those trees you're not going to tap. So
Right.
I would tap and then thin. If you're gonna take the trees out anyhow, why not tap them for a few years,
Right.
and then thin them?
Yeah.
But it all depends on your stand, obviously, and
Sure.
Mhm. And for timing wise, most tubing systems have a 10-ish year lifespan. So if that helps with your timing of tapping plus thinning, something to think about.
Something to conclude. Yeah. So Joe asked, does the flavor of the syrup go bad like when when you get bud out? Do you have to worry about bud out on walnut?
I'm almost certain you would. It would be a similar Physiology, but I'm not sure that we have done anything,
Gone that
seen
far.
anything like, yeah.
Okay.
We often see trees stop running in walnut before we've seen off flavored syrup.
Mhm.
Okay.
And that pectin may have something to do with, closing off, stopping the sap flow, reducing the amount of compartmentalization. It could all be tied together. Those are good research questions, Ohio State.
I have to say that our attendees can come up with some real stumpers for our speakers. So they definitely dive in and dig deep for stuff.
Good.
So Joe says, Heartnut is similar to butternut, yet my taps this year had 0 sap. Have you tried Heartnut?
Never heard of Hardnut.
So Heartnut's a hybrid and it looks like a heart. I mean, the nut actually looks like a heart in some context.
Is it a juglans genus?
Yes.
Wow.
And off the top of my head, I'll have to look that one up because I don't deal with that one very often. But yeah, it's another one usually grown for nut production.
I would say, let me know what you find.
The more info, the better.
Yeah.
There we go. John put it in. The Heartnut is a Japanese black walnut.
Okay. I know they're tapping walnut trees in Russia. A guy there's got 1,000 taps in.
Wow.
So
Okay. So Nikki asked, does tapping harm a tree nutrient wise? Is there a limit to how much sap you should tap from a tree? And this is also one of those questions you get when you talk about vacuum on maples,
Yeah.
Should we be
And-
sucking all that out of?
the answer is that the people up north have done on maple, and so I'm adopting it is that it doesn't if you stick to the guidelines. If you over tap, you can have a problem, but if you stick to the guidelines, they say that it does not have a negative impact.
Okay, so Mary Lou wants to know about the flavor of the butternut syrup.
We've both tasted it. It's nice. Salt City Maple is the only one that's commercially doing it. We just tapped 2 trees. If you got a stove, tap one or 2 and find
Start
out.
boiling.
Yeah.
Chip wants to know what other byproducts are you exploring from walnut, if anything?
We are not. Maybe walnut jelly. Okay.
Ew, that'd be interesting.
We've made some of that. So.
Have you?
Oh
And-
yeah. When our walnut syrup just.
I was about to
It's
say
so-
both intentionally and unintentionally.
Yeah, it just kind of turned into jelly.
Well, you have all that pectin, right?
That's
So
right.
you-
That's right.
And what does it taste like?
I
Same
haven't
as the
tasted
syrup?
it. Have you tasted it?
Congealed syrup?
I got it in the jar. It's congealed, but I've not tasted it.
It's most visually appealing, I'd say.
Is
Yeah. It's the thought of the jellyfish and then the pectin. You didn't. Right away, it doesn't seem to be
yeah, smear a jellyfish on your piece of
on your peanut butter sandwich. Yeah.
So if you're planting walnut seedlings, what is the optimum distance between seedlings if you're going to plant for this, I guess?
I would turn that over to an Ohio forester.
Well, if you're doing a planting that you're planning on managing for a timber product of some sort that you're going to tap maybe in between, you typically like to plant them close together so that you don't have to deal with a lot of pruning lower limbs to get that clear lower log. If we're talking strictly, that kind of aspect of what your management scheme is. So you want rows wide enough apart that you can maintain the plantation in its early stages. So that's how wide is your mower? What are you going to maintain with? And then within the row, you can go closer. You could go 6, 8, 10 feet. I probably wouldn't go more than 10 because you're going to increase your pruning aspect. I mean, the cost of pruning, if you're timber, will go up. So that's kind of where I would. And I've noticed with some growers that you do these walnut plantations with, they fall in love with their trees. And so thinning is not an option because they don't want to cut any of them. So maybe it doesn't matter, but usually closer so that it naturally prunes some things is what you're looking at. So Gary asks, if tapped sapwood and walnut is removed when sawn, would any damage occur in the heartwood?
You should not tap into the hardwood. It doesn't have any sap. It doesn't
Right.
do anything. And so you should not damage the hardwood at all.
Okay, so Richard wants to know, is juglone present in sap?
Don't know.
Okay.
Good question.
That is a good question. I wouldn't have thought of asking about that. Mark Rickey says, try tapping them to death is a thinning goal.
Your trees.
Yeah, Mark. Joe says, when and where can we get the black walnut taps?
We are working with RCBI this season to put some prototypes, 2 or 3 prototypes out and have them evaluated by producers. And then they have the injection molding capability. But the first ones we made were stainless steel, a little expensive, like about $20 a piece. But now they have a ability to vacuum mold them, and we hope to have them out a year from now commercially available.
Okay. Well, when you have them available, we can always blast out a notice for folks.
I'll tell you this, whoever asked that last question, take their name because I'll send them some just to try. Okay. We're looking for
We'll have to go
collaborators
back.
who would try a walnut tap and see what they think of it.
It was Joe.
Was it Joe? Okay. You make a note of that. So Chip says, this is our last one. I did make walnut jelly, LOL, added additional pectin to thicken, turned out well.
Oh, there you go.
Hey,
But he wasn't thinking about jellyfish at that point.
He was not, his mind was not on jellyfish, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now he's going to be thinking about jellyfish. And Scott just added, we would test some of the taps if you're willing as well.
Sure.
So we got a couple then that,
Keep those names. I'm looking for some people who will do that. That's part of the project
okay,
that we hope, we're not certain, but we hope to be able to initiate this fall.
okay.
Yeah.
So Marnie, make a
That'd be
note
cool.
for Scott.
Yep. I got them down.
And then Anne says, Turkish Delight is heavy on pectin and uses walnuts and fruit.
Huh.
Might work well.
What's Turkish Delight, guys?
So that's another, I think that's
That's cool.
another walnut
Okay.
variety.
I think
So,
it's candy or something.
so
Yeah,
Gary,
I thought it was
also,
a candy too.
okay, so
I don't know.
Gary, let me go back here. Let's see, Turkish Scott. Liberty Orchards provides the Turkish Delight, Ann said. So Gary said, follow up to my first question, if the tap doesn't touch heartwood, then there'd be no issue tapping a crop tree, right?
That's my way of looking at it. Yeah.
Okay. So Turkish Delight is a wonderful candy.
Yes, I think I've had them in the
Okay.
past.
Very, very gel-like.
All right, I think that's, and Scott put his info in the chat too, Marnie, so grab that. I think we can just grab the chat, right?
Yeah, I don't even see Scott's info, but yeah.
Yeah.
And if you
he's
registered with an email address, we'll probably reach out to you that way.
okay. Oh, look at,
Oh.
ooh. See, Kate, that color is, it's like a continuation of the color of the heartwood.
That's right. That's right.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool.
That's
I
really
didn't
cool.
realize this was sitting on my porch, so I might as well show it.
Yeah. That's the first showing. That was yesterday's work. So
Yeah.
No, I
Fresh-
mean, I could see that, and I actually, I've seen some of the cross sections made into tables, and they sell it as some fancy kind of maple wood.
Mhm.
I could see the same thing there. I could see cross sections, cookies made, and tables created. So I bet that would go like wildfire. So I think, so lots of good questions. I do have Emily says, if you want to test a tap in Kansas, I'd love to contribute to the research. I tapped 12 trees last year and plan to again this winter.
Catch your number.
Okay,
Okay.
we got her.
If we get, basically, we're looking at a specialty crop block grant to work with RCBI and put some of the stuff out to producers. And it would be like 2 or 3 different models and say, hey, which one works? What do you think is the best? And so we
Right.
get a couple producers out there. It'd be fun. It'd be fun to have some in Ohio and Kansas too. That really would.
Okay. We'll help where we can. So thanks, guys. I'm gonna
Yeah.
have Marnie stop the recording.